Welcome to Practical Talk Time. I'm your host, Usha Kumar. Today, I'm going to chat with a wonderful guest that has come here to share about healthcare, especially the state of healthcare in Connecticut. My guest is Lynne Ide, and she is the program director of Universal Healthcare Foundation of Connecticut. So please join me in welcoming Lynne. Lynne Ide, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
I have been trying for a long time to get you to come and be a guest on my show and talk about all the wonderful work that you've been doing, you and your organization have been doing, regarding making healthcare more accessible to everyone in Connecticut, and also improving the quality of healthcare. But the work is not done, right?
Far from done.
You still have a lot to do in terms of really reaching more people, and also have a lot to do with trying to contain the runaway costs of healthcare in Connecticut. And before we start talking about the subject matter, I'd like you to give us a little bit of information about your career and how you came to be director of this organization.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm not the director. I'm in charge of program and policy.
I see.
But I have been working at the Universal Healthcare Foundation of Connecticut since 2006. And before I came to the foundation, I've been a policy advocate and lobbyist for several different non-profit organizations, advocacy organizations in the state of Connecticut.
Particularly, you were in CCAG.
I was at the Connecticut Citizen Action Group in the 80s and early 90s. I was the director there for 5 years. I was the director of a statewide advocacy organization called the Legislative Electoral Action Program in the 90s, and then the associate director of the Connecticut Housing Coalition for a number of years. I've been working on healthcare policy, though, since the early 1980s in one way, shape or form.
In all these years, in what, 30 years now?
Yes.
What do you see happening in the area of healthcare?
Well, for a minute, I just want to say a little bit about the Universal Healthcare Foundation, so your listeners understand, what we're doing, where I come from now. We're a statewide nonprofit philanthropic organization. We were founded about 15 years ago when Anthem Insurance Company purchased Blue Cross Blue Shield of Connecticut, and at that time, some consumer organizations and some labor organizations, and Richard Blumenthal as the Attorney General and Nancy Wyman as the Comptroller, stood up and said all the assets from Blue Cross Blue Shield should not be gobbled up by Anthem. And so there was a court settlement in the case, and that money, that pot of money, was set aside to create the Universal Healthcare Foundation of Connecticut. And so we are entrusted with a mission of working to achieve transformational change of our state's healthcare system.
And so that is how this particular organization was born.
That's how we were born. And we are what is called a conversion foundation, and there are several others in Connecticut. The Connecticut Health Foundation and the Foundation for Community Health had similar beginnings when a nonprofit organization was bought up by a for-profit entity.
Do we have any of the insurance companies that are nonprofit now?
It's interesting.
Because Blue Cross and Blue Shield was well known in Connecticut because it was a nonprofit organization and it covered healthcare so beautifully for the citizens. Until Anthem took over.
I can't comment on that, but I can say that when that transaction happened, we no longer had any nonprofit health insurance companies in Connecticut until the past couple of years, we have, under the Affordable Care Act, there was money in the Affordable Care Act to help with some startup loans to co-ops, actually. And so Connecticut, a group of physicians got together with consumers and applied to become a nonprofit co-op in Connecticut, and the Healthy CT Connecticut was formed. And so now we are happy to have a new nonprofit in the market. It's really not a matter of whether it's for-profit or not for-profit, but also whether or not there's competition in the marketplace. If consumers are going to be buying insurance, it's good that they have more choices and quality choices. And so we have Healthy CT, but also since the opening up of the Affordable Care Act, another nonprofit has come into Connecticut, Harvard Pilgrim, which many people in New England may know of. They're from Massachusetts, and they are a nonprofit insurance company.
When did they come in?
They just came in within the past year.
Oh, after the Affordable Care Act.
Yes, yes. So that's one upside of the Affordable Care Act, is that we actually have more competition in the marketplace here in Connecticut and more choices for consumers.
I see. But then a lot of consumers are not familiar with those companies, and so they kind of stay still with the older for-profit insurance companies at this point without even looking at the prices.
Well, let me just say that health insurance is a very personal issue. It's not like almost any other commodity that people purchase, because everybody is different. Everybody has a different family makeup, different health needs that they're dealing with. And so I just want to just backtrack a little bit and say that one of the things that the foundation is committed to doing is to be a catalyst for change in our healthcare system, where we can focus on quality healthcare at a price that people can afford and our society can sustain, and that we are focusing on things that will improve people's health over time, such as prevention, and focus on primary care and sound patient and provider management of chronic health conditions, or if possible to avoid becoming a victim of a chronic health condition. So we really like to look at this from three different points of view. One is access. Do people have access to care when they need it, and appropriate care? The other is quality. Is the care that we're getting focusing on health rather than management of sickness? And then also, is it affordable? Not just for the individual, but for our society as a whole.
Yeah, about your organization itself, since it was created from the funds received from such a purchase,
a court settlement,
does not receive any funds currently from government or from any particular bodies?
No, we're an independent, nonprofit organization, and we have a board of directors made up of people who are committed to our mission to be a catalyst for transformational change of our state's healthcare system. And we do what many philanthropies do, which is provide grant funding to help further our mission. So there are some organizations with whom we partner, whom we fund to do work with us.
The Universal Healthcare Foundation of Connecticut, does this organization or any of the organizations that it gives grants to, are they politically affiliated with any parties?
Well, under the IRS code, if you are a 501c3 charitable organization, you cannot have any, you cannot engage in political activity. So we are nonpartisan. But there may be organizations with whom we work either through grant funding or other partnerships who, depending on what their corporate makeup is, may be allowed to engage in some level of work that is overtly political, but they can't do it under our banner.
Okay. So this is basically created and running there for the benefit of the citizens of the state.
Well, I think
or is it for national level too?
To be honest, I think some of our detractors might disagree with that, but generally speaking, our mission is to be a catalyst for transformational change, focusing on those three things that I said earlier, which are how can we focus on health rather than just sick care? How can we make sure that people have access to the care, appropriate care, the care that they need when they need it? How can we make sure that the quality of our care and the cost of our care is something we can sustain over time?
Your organization itself, even before the Affordable Care Act came into place, it has been working with the state government, state of Connecticut, right, trying to pass certain legislations locally to help with this mission?
Yes. Well, we are primarily an advocacy slash philanthropic organization. And so the kind of work that we do employs several different types of strategies. One is learning and educating to do or compile research that helps build the case for what would work here in Connecticut and how changes in our healthcare system are going to benefit the people of the state. We also work in partnership and coalition with like-minded organizations and a diverse cross-section of organizations ranging from faith-based advocates to community-based advocates to small businesses, labor unions, medical people who are in the business of providing medical care, doctors, nurses, APRNs.
I remember a few years ago, probably it was in 2009, a legislation was trying to get passed regarding healthcare, and the then Governor Jody Rell vetoed it.
Oh, okay.
And then afterwards, the legislature went and overturned her veto,
right,
and then still got it passed, and that was the sustenance effort, right?
Right.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure, I can.
So our audience will understand what you're talking about.
Well, one of the things we wanted to do was try to figure out, this was before the Affordable Care Act and before the Obama was even on the national scene in many ways. And
so there was no question of getting any healthcare related legislation getting passed at the federal level. You were trying to do something at the state level.
People may remember when the Affordable Care Act was passed in 2010, people who were talking about the history of the fight for comprehensive health reform had gone back at that point over 100 years to Teddy Roosevelt. So there are many leaders and many advocates over a 100-year period who've been fighting for a comprehensive healthcare reform. And at that time, in the early part of the 2000s, we really felt that the state was going to have to step up to the plate and figure out something that would work here in Connecticut. And so we did some research on what the possible models for that might be. We had health economists do economic modeling to figure out how that might affect people in the state of Connecticut economically. It might affect the job market, the taxes, things like that. And we also built alliances and coalitions, partnerships with a diverse group of organizations. And we basically spent between 2005 and 2009 talking to people from all over the state and different stakeholders and doing our research and figuring out what could we do here in Connecticut to try to get us to a point where everybody in the state had access to quality, affordable health care. And what we came up with was the sustanet proposal, and it was named after the state, using one of the words from the state motto, which is qui transtulit sustanet. He who is transplanted sustains, and sustanet means to sustain. And so we thought it was a little patriotic to take it out of the state motto, but we also wanted to talk about something that was sustainable, that would sustain health, that would sustain us economically, and put us in a better place.
Do you know why the governor vetoed the effort?
Let me just backtrack. So the bill that we put forward in January of 2009, after those years of work, was a bill that would have opened up the, we already have a state employee pool in Connecticut. We have a bunch of people who are the state employees and their dependents who are insured by the state. We also have a group of people who are on Medicaid, which some people in the state may know as Husky, that are insured through that program. And what we found through our research is that there were many people who are self-employed and small business owners, or people who may have had pre-existing conditions and been denied insurance by their insurance companies that they could afford. That we wanted to open up the ability for people who were in those categories to buy into what is called a public option in the language of health reform, but to get under the umbrella with the state employees and the Medicaid folks and get some of the economies of scale and try to get affordable insurance.
Was that public option model a single payer model?
No, it wasn't. No.
Okay.
And what it would do is it would say you can buy in to this insurance. You could still do it through a private insurance company, or you could join the sustanet plan. And you would pay on a sliding scale basis based on your ability to pay. And we would have to have applied to the federal government for waivers to maybe use some money from federal healthcare dollars to help people who are on the lower end of the economic scale, who earn too much to qualify for Medicaid, but not enough to pay out of their own pocket.
Yeah, my concern with the way we've had runaway costs is that the costs, the premiums plus the deductible, whatever, the out-of-pocket expense for a person is way out of whack with a person's earnings and how much they have to pay for their mortgage, for their home and for food, and then there's hardly anything left for the health care. Or if you pay for the health care, there's nothing left to buy your own home or to eat.
Well, could you just hold on that a second?
Yes.
Let me just...
I'm trying to move it along because we only have 10 minutes left.
Okay, well, I just want to say that you asked me why the governor vetoed the bill that was passed. Many people could say that it had to do with a lot of pressure from the insurance industry in the state of Connecticut, who, quite frankly, were threatened by the idea of not having people buy insurance from insurance companies. That there was direct competition for them. And she vetoed it. It was overridden. Fast forward.
So that was the insurance company lobby.
Right. And fast forward to 2010. This was in July of 2009 when the veto was overridden. Fast forward to 2010 when the Affordable Care Act was passed at the federal level. And what many people around the country don't understand is that when the Affordable Care Act was passed, it superseded all state laws.
I see.
So it basically said to any state that may have passed a comprehensive health reform law and or had plans to institute comprehensive health reform like Vermont, which was working on single payer, it basically said, we want you all to play along with the Affordable Care Act and institute that act, and then come 2017, in the federal law, there is a clause that says that states can approach the federal government for waivers, allowances to try some different things.
I see.
So basically, about that same time when Governor Malloy was elected, the state of Connecticut as its policy really, decided that we were going to go whole hog into making sure that we implemented the Affordable Care Act to the best of our ability here at the state level. The trouble with almost any reform that you do at the state or federal level, unless you completely take away the old system and replace it with something new that is more streamlined and not sort of just squeezing the water balloon here and there.
Now you're doing a little patchwork of whatever was there already and trying to match it up with something
The
new.
Affordable Care Act did tremendous things for consumers of health care. Number one, precluded
Nobody can be denied.
Nobody can be denied care
healthcare,
based on a pre-existing condition, right? Number two, children can stay on their parents' plan up until the age of 26. Number three, insurance company policies have to use at least 80 cents of every dollar for direct care and no more than 20 cents of every dollar you pay them for administrative and other forms of overhead.
But still, that needs to be checked against the numbers.
Oh, that's true. And then it also for the first time ever, gave people a way to buy health insurance with a subsidy provided to them.
I think that has been very
through the
useful.
federal government. And so in a state like Connecticut, the people who didn't have insurance before the Affordable Care Act were largely in those categories of people who couldn't afford to buy in or had some sort of pre-existing condition. And all of a sudden that was turned on its head and people were given a new option through our health insurance exchange, Access Health CT, which was created as a result of the Federal Affordable Care Act. And that if you qualified, if your family income was $94,000 or less, you could qualify for subsidies. And there would be caps put on how much you could be paying out of pocket. So for many people, it was a good thing.
Oh, yes.
But it isn't enough. It didn't really address the cost of health care going up and up and up over time. It has flattened the rate of increase in health care costs, but there continue to be problems with access to care depending on where you live, what your income is, what your whether there are language barriers, whether you live in a rural area and you can't find a provider.
Or along the state borders.
Perhaps along the state borders. And so there are issues there. There are issues with consolidation in the healthcare industry. We've seen that with hospitals, and that's a whole other topic.
We only have 3 minutes left. And so because of that, we may have to continue our chat into another show that'll air the same time the following week. And I have a lot of questions which I pulled out from all kinds of media right here in Connecticut about the questions that people have and the things that they are not really happy about the current healthcare. Also, we want to know whether your organization, Universal Healthcare Foundation, has had any hand in drafting any of the Affordable Care Act details, or they were totally out of it and the insurance companies had the full say. Because the big winners are the insurance companies and the healthcare industry, really, because now they're getting our government tax money fully to pay for a lot of things. Another thing is, could you quickly tell about the meeting that happens from time to time that people can watch over CTN? Or
I think that's a longer story. Maybe we should save that for the next show. But what I want to do is wrap up on a point that you just made, which is consumers, people who need health care, people who buy health care, people who access health care. Their voice is often so left out of this conversation. And one of our causes in the coming year is to really up the consumer voice in the healthcare conversation. And so we can talk more about that and answer some of your questions at the next conversation. But before we go, I just want to say, check us out at Universal Healthcare, which is universalhealthct.org. follow our blog, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and
also if people want to volunteer or
yes.
Talk to you guys, what should they do?
They should go on to our website at universalhealthct.org and follow the prompts to sign up and get involved.
So people can get involved by writing to you or participating or volunteering in any of your events?
Yes.
Because I want to talk about some of the events that you've held from your organization, and I want to know what projects you're involved in now that people can get involved in.
Okay.
Or give their input.
Okay.
So that you can work on the questions and the demands of the general public.
Okay.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. You have so much knowledge in this area. I really would like to pick your brains, but then we have a very limited time on our show. It's just 28 minutes running straight, and I want to try and get as many questions answered by you as possible.
Okay, maybe at the next show we can cover many of them. Thank you.
Okay, so the next show we will still talk about the same topic, but then we are going to handle all of the people's public questions and a little bit more about how everyone should be participating in this dialogue, and everybody should be trying to volunteer and do what they can to improve healthcare, contain the costs, and improve the lives of people in Connecticut. I think everyone should be involved in it.
Okay.
Thank you.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you very much, Lynne. That was Lynne Ide, and she will be here again next week to answer all of our questions. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to write to practicaltalktime@yahoo.com. I hope you enjoyed this show. Until next time.